This is happening. The judge is talking. Judge Cheryl Matthews is getting ready to read the sentence right now against or for Jennifer and James Crumbley. We have heard the victim impact statements today, very powerful, from parents, loved ones of those who perished on that day for high schoolers. But now we've also been able to digest for a few minutes the very words of the people who are guilty of involuntary manslaughter after their son, Ethan Crumbley, at the age of 15, killed people at his school. Let's tune in now to the judge.
I prayed about this case, I've thought about this case, and I've considered the possibility for rehabilitation, the need to protect society, the penalty appropriate to the conduct and goal of deterring others from similar conduct. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation reports. I am, of course, sadly familiar with the facts and circumstances of these cases, as well as those surrounding each defendant. The advisory sentencing guidelines in this matter do not capture the catastrophic impact of the acts or inaction in these matters. The guidelines do not take into account the complete lack of insight both defendants have for their behavior to this very day. The guidelines do not account for the severity of the circumstances in this matter. The guidelines ignore the survivors, including shooting victims Phoebe Arthur, Elijah Mueller, Riley Franz, Kylie Osage, John Asciutto, Molly Darnell, and Aiden Watson. They were deeply wounded, both physically and emotionally. In addition to the 7 wounded, each of the defendants' gross negligence has caused unimaginable suffering to hundreds of others as a result of what happened that day. Each act or inaction created a ripple effect. Therefore, an out-of-guidelines sentence is appropriate and proportional. The court uses the useful tool of the legislative guidelines, which embody the principles of proportionality, while also taking into account the nature of the offense and the background of each defendant. I believe that the following sentences would be in the best interest of justice and are reasonable and proportionate to the seriousness of the matter and the circumstances surrounding each defendant. With regard to Jennifer Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court, Ms. Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You will have credit for 858 days. State costs are $272. There's a crime victims' rights fee of $130. You and your agents may not have any contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. I will issue another ruling with regard to contact with your son, the shooter. Excuse me. As to defendant James Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, that you receive credit for 858 days, that you pay state costs in the matter of $272, that there is a crime victims' rights fee of $130, that you or your agents have no contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. Ms. Wheeler, have I left anything out with regard to sentencing?
I don't think so.
No restitution has been requested by any of the families at this time, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I would like to advise both defendants that you are entitled to appellate review of your conviction and sentence, including that the sentence exceeds the guideline range. This is done by filing a claim of appeal by right, and when you are not entitled to file a claim of appeal by right, an application for leave to appeal. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney to represent you on appeal, and you request an attorney may be appointed for you. You may request an attorney by completing the request for appointment of attorney section of the form that will be provided for you, and by returning the form to this court or to the Michigan Assigned Counsel System at the address on the form. If you wish to preserve your automatic right to appeal, the form must be received within 42 days after sentencing. If you do not submit the form within 42 days from today, you may still file an application for leave to appeal if the form is received within 6 months after sentencing. Do each of the defendants acknowledge receipt of their appellate rights?
James acknowledges receipt, Your Honor. He's completed the form as we speak.
Your Honor, my plan is as well. Does the would the court like the forms here, or would you prefer us to?
It doesn't matter either way.
Okay.
Either way.
All right, so we have just seen the sentence given by the judge in this Rochester Hills, Michigan courtroom now for parents Jennifer and James Crumbley, who were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter after their 15-year-old son, a sophomore in high school, killed classmates and injured 7 other people. Each parent gets 10 to 15 years behind bars. Time served, 858 days credit, and then they went into some smaller numbers of remuneration for the legal process. I want to bring in now Brian Claypool, criminal defense attorney. Brian, you and I have been watching this together now for a couple of hours. What do you make of the sentencing that this judge has given each of those parents?
Hey, Harris, you and I talked a while ago about the value of these victim impact statements. And before I even talked to you this morning, I thought when I woke up, these parents would probably get between 6 and 8 years. But I will tell you categorically, when you and I talked about the moms up there talking about their daughters, looking at their dead bodies, they sat there for 10 minutes in a pool of blood, and these kids can't go to proms, they can't go to college, they can't go married. That played a major factor in Judge Matthews giving them the harshest sentence. She went beyond, just so your viewers know, this is an extraordinary sentence. She went beyond what's called advisory guidelines, which had the sentencing lower. She went higher at 10 to 15.
And I want to understand that because everything I read said that the max was 15. So when you say she went beyond the guidelines, it's still within that guideline of being the maximum sentence.
Yeah, apparently there is an advisory guideline in Michigan that made a recommendation or capped the sentencing, I believe, at 10 years, and that's why prosecutors are saying 10 to 15. Why did they do that?
Okay.
Because Harris, judges can do what they want. Basically, when it comes to sentencing.
Now, I know you were watching, so I want to try to understand how differently these two people were represented by counsel. The defense counsel for Jennifer Crumbley, just moments before the judge handed the sentencing and before her husband James spoke, was arguing that the medical records were not, medical professionals, there wasn't enough done in that case. It felt like a setup for appeal for the mom, Jennifer Crumbley, more than it did for a setup of don't give her that many years. What was going on there, and what impressed you most about, well, we'll come to that first. First of all, what was going on there with the judge and this defense attorney?
Yeah, Harris, you're right. I mean, first of all, it was inappropriate, I think, at that juncture for the lawyer for Crumbley to get up and talk to the judge about that. Save that for another day. And I think what she was trying to do was to influence Judge Matthews' ruling on how many years both the Crumbleys get. But I will tell you, it was misplaced. It was a catastrophic failure to make those comments at a sentencing hearing. And in my opinion, the Crumbleys are borderline psychopaths. Both of them talk more about how this has affected them. What an inconvenience for them to be in jail. And they're going to have to live the rest of their lives thinking about this. What about the victims? That's the first thing they should have done. Stood up.
Well, James Crumbley did.
And said, yeah. Oh, Harris, look, I've done close to 100 jury trials in my career. James Crumbley was so not authentic. His heart was not in it. And you saw at the end, his voice inflected more when he was talking about how he got a miscarriage of justice. Remember that at the end? He was talking about, we're going to get the truth on this. Well, wait a minute, dude. What about these 4 young lives that have been lost? He was more passionate about that. He was like this, trying to read. I mean, it was crazy.
Brian Claypool, we appreciate your expertise today. It was a lot to take in.